From the heartland of America and the gateway to the West, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. I'm George Norrie. This is Coast to Coast AM. Later tonight, a walk on the paranormal side. Here's what's happening. An off-duty pilot riding as a passenger in the cockpit of an Alaska Airlines flight tried to disrupt the operations of the engines, forcing the flight en route to San Francisco to divert to Portland. The suspect, identified by police as Joseph Emerson, 44-year-old, was subdued by the flight crew and taken into custody by the Port of Portland police officers. Emerson has been charged with 83 felony counts of attempted murder, 83 counts of reckless endangerment, and 1 count of endangering an aircraft. Unbelievable. The blockaded Gaza Strip has been hit by one of the deadliest fights of Israel bombing so far in the war against the militant group Hamas, as 2 more hostages were freed today amid reports that talks to secure the release of dozens of others were underway. At least 400 Palestinians were killed in Gaza in the last 24 hours, according to the Hamas-run health ministry. 70 were killed overnight. The armed wing of the Hamas military group said that it had released these 2 more female civilian captives on health grounds in response to Egyptian Qatar mediation efforts. Spokesperson for the armed wing said in a statement, "We decided to release them for humanitarian and poor health grounds." Jaswant Singh Chahal entered the grounds of the Windsor Castle in England dressed as a lord, carrying a crossbow, when security approached him, and he told them he was there to kill the Queen. Later, it emerged that the 21-year-old had been spurred on by conversations he'd been having with a chat box app called Replica. He had exchanged more than 5,000 messages with an avatar on the app that he believed the app, Saari, would be an angel. Some of the bot's replies encouraged his plotting. Lauren Weinstein, our expert on the internet, is that's kind of dangerous, Lauren. Strange stuff.
Yeah, well, this is obviously a pretty extreme example, which isn't a particularly good representation of the kinds of problems that most people face when dealing with these large language model AI chatbot systems. But it does serve to demonstrate yet again how people can be lulled, sometimes in obvious ways and sometimes in much more subtle ways, into treating these systems as if they were actual human beings that were carrying on human conversations and then acting accordingly, where in reality that's not what they are at all, of course. But going back decades to the simple ELIZA-type question-response language models, even then it was observed that people quickly get into the discussion that these can affect much more of their thinking than would originally have been anticipated. And now the systems are so vastly more advanced that they're on a completely different planet in terms of capabilities. But while the software systems have changed, people haven't. Human nature really never changes. It probably hasn't changed in any significant way since the caves, which were probably earlier. And we're really only scratching the surface of these systems' capabilities and how they can affect people. And we've really only begun to even study this. It does seem clear, though, that many people do feel more comfortable talking to these machines about their concerns and problems than they are talking to actual human beings, even though the responses from the systems can, in some cases, as we know, be totally nuts, replete with falsehoods, effectively machine-generated hallucinations. And so far, we haven't really seen major actionable acknowledgments of these problems from the various firms deploying these systems, deployed often seemingly well before they're really ready for public use. They keep pushing these systems out for everyone because they're each apparently concerned about falling behind in this very competitive area, so the public ends up being the guinea pigs. And the kinds of disclaimers that may accompany these systems about how they may be inaccurate or may be obnoxious, how they can tell lies, etc., are considered essentially useless by many observers because, A, most people don't read them, and B, if the disclaimers happen to be read, they'll usually just be completely ignored. And while the example you gave, as I said, is an extreme one, there's no good reason to suggest that there can't be even more extreme examples moving forward, because people do tend to ignore the disclaimers, and they can be highly motivated to treat these systems like actual people. Again, as we even saw many, many years ago with ELIZA. And given the variations among individuals when exposed to these AI models and how rapidly the systems are becoming even more human-like and convincing in their responses while still often spouting misinformation and nonsense, it's going to be quite a wild ride unless serious but sensible regulatory approaches to help manage these systems actually are forthcoming. And really, the sooner the better. better.
I agree with that, Lauren. Thank you. Tesla is recalling nearly 55,000 of its 2021-23 Model X SUVs because the vehicle controller may fail to detect low brake fluid and will not display a warning light. A vehicle controller that does not correctly indicate low brake fluid levels to the consumer may impact braking performance and may increase the risk of a collision. The first significant snowfall of the season is on way for the northwestern U.S. and parts of the northern plains. And by the time the last flake falls, many high elevation areas will be buried in more than a foot of fresh snow. Here's Dr. Sky Stephen Cates with his weekly report on what's going on up there. Hey, Stephen, how are you?
Doing great, George. How about you?
Okay.
Hey, we're moving forward by talking first in this episode about low Earth orbit. We find out, George, that Russia moves a satellite dangerously close to another satellite, with, of course, space becoming more crowded, as we know. The story is Russia has saber-rattled once again by moving its Lurch 2 satellite very close to other nations' satellites on purpose, and at times within just 10 kilometers of these space assets. And this intelligence from a company known as Slingshot Aerospace. George, they use sophisticated tracking algorithms and AI to track satellites in space. But that's not all. In 2020, two Russian satellites, the Cosmos 2542 and the Cosmos 2543, came close to spy on one of our KH-11 reconnaissance satellites. And that same Russian satellite, or one of those, later fired a projectile into space, but obviously not at any specific satellite, directing a lot of the world's nations' attention to this new type of space warfare platform. But continuing on the same theme, finally, a Cosmos 2499 satellite broke up intentionally in space, creating a cloud of debris in which other space assets could be in the way of this type of intentional explosive satellite. This is a class of Russian RPO satellites, standing for Rendezvous, Proximity, and Observer satellites. This is a class of Russian satellites, and obviously could start some sort of confrontation in space as we talk about the possibility of space warfare in the future. But in other satellite news, we know low Earth orbit, that is so crowded, and it's going to be so populated in the years to come. George, estimates of 1 million space objects in orbit in just a few years. And SpaceX's Starlink now has some 4,924 satellites in orbit, with Amazon following up with trying to launch their Project Kuiper, looking to push some 3,200 satellites into low Earth orbit soon. But the other big issue that we're talking about is how to protect radio frequencies between satellites and also protect those used by radio astronomy. But now, George, we move out to deep space. Astronomers have now detected the most distant, fast radio burst yet. How far away? Some 8 billion light years away. And this is the power of a fast radio burst in milliseconds. It's more than the output of the sun in decades in just milliseconds. Many feel that these amazing energy beacons come from a class of stellar objects known as magnetars. These are supermagnetized neutron stars, which have what they call star quakes on their surface and release these mega radio waves of intense energy. Nobody really understands it. But George, 8 billion light years distance is an amazing record for an object like this, as the whole universe is thought to be only, 13.77 billion years old itself. We wrap it up with the live sky. Early morning risers. We'll get to see Venus in the pre-dawn sky. It's farthest from the sun now, some 45 degrees away in the east before dawn. The moon is now some 9.5 days past new. It's obviously high in the south at sunset. It goes to what we call a gibbous phase, but it's full on the 28th of this month at 4:24 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. We call this one the full hunter's moon. And, George, on the other side of the Earth, they get a partial lunar eclipse. More information always at theskylive.com. Emails, we love those, drsky@gmail.com. And we always say it, we mean it. Always remember to keep your eyes to the skies. I'm your navigator on the highway to the heavens. Thank you.
You sure are, Doc, and we'll see you next week. Dr. Stephen Cates. Up next, one of our favorite guests, Michael Cremo, joins us as we talk about forbidden archaeology, next on Coast to Coast AM. Well, welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you. Michael Cremo back with us, also known as the Forbidden Archaeologist, is hailed as a groundbreaking research pioneer and international authority on archaeological anomalies. His landmark bestseller, Forbidden Archaeology, first published back in 1993, already translated into at least 26 languages, challenged the very foundation of the Darwinian evolution. Michael continues to dig up discoveries in the fossil record and shake up accepted paradigms. Hello, Michael. Welcome back.
Great to be back, George.
What have you uncovered this time, my friend?
Well, among the recent discoveries that have been made is one that's really caught my attention. That's the one at Colombo Falls in the country of Zambia in Africa. Their archaeologists found timber beams that have been put together with carefully interlocking notches. It's really amazing because this site is about 476,000 years old.
Whoa.
And one of the articles says, scientists find structures from before Homo sapiens existed. I think they've got it wrong. Currently, most scientists think that Homo sapiens like us first came into existence less than 300,000 years ago. So I think this evidence, which is of the kind that archaeologists have traditionally associated with Homo sapiens, with human beings like us, really pushes the origin of Homo sapiens back to about 476,000 years, which to me is a step in the right direction because I think humans like us have been around for millions of years.
Michael, why can't science agree with each other about the ancient age? I agree with you. You've been on a program for over 20 years with us, and I think you've been spot on. But why can't science agree with you?
Well, some of them are starting to think a little bit outside the box. There was a couple of them came up a couple of years ago with something called the Silurian hypothesis, which they began to speculate maybe there was a human civilization on this planet hundreds of millions of years ago during the Silurian period, which is about 440 million years ago. So some of them are starting to think about the possibilities, but I think you're right that a lot of them are really resistant, and I think that's because in one sense, it's just human nature, that we get committed to things that we're deeply involved in, and if someone points out something that contradicts the deeply held thought or theory or hypothesis that we have, become a little bit resistant. So it's kind of understandable on the human level from one sense, but sometimes we have to be able to transcend our feelings and emotions and just appreciate what the facts are.
Now, what's the significance of this discovery in the Colombo Falls area? Well,
generally scientists speak of ancient times as the Stone Age. People, that's even into common conversation. Are we supposed to live like the Stone Age? But maybe what we call the Stone Age and the periods before that were a little more advanced than we think, because what's really significant about this elaborate woodworking ability that was discovered at Colombo Falls is that normally such things don't get preserved. The reason these wooden logs with these notches, these interlocking notches, were discovered is because the area is very damp and it keeps the oxygen out, and the didn't rot away. Stone tools aren't going to rot. They stick around for hundreds of thousands or even millions of years. But things made of organic materials like leather, cloth, wood, they could have had a whole civilization, with elaborate wooden carved houses and elaborate types of leather used for shoes and boots and hats and things like that. But it wouldn't survive. So I think that's one thing that's significant about this discovery is it reminds us that when archaeologists are looking into the ground to try to learn about the human past, they may not be getting the whole picture because a lot of the stuff just doesn't survive.
The flood of Noah occurred about 4,500 years ago. And, it sounds like a long time back, but when you think of the possibilities that there was a civilization 476,000 years ago, that's nothing, Michael.
Yeah. When I look at things, I see reasons to think human beings have always been around. So in that sense, I'm not a creationist. And I'm not an evolutionist. I'm kind of somewhere in a different space, you could say.
Were there extinction events for humans way gone back, do you think?
Yes, but I think the cosmos is structured in such a way that the resources and intelligence needed to repopulate the earth with humans has always been there, kind of like in the cloud. Like you can have all of the songs and files and pictures on your phone or laptop or tablet stored on the cloud, so to speak, so that if your device gets destroyed, you can get a new device and download everything and just carry on as before. So I think there are periodic devastations that do wipe out life on Earth, including human life, periodically. But the resources are there on these higher levels to repopulate the Earth, reboot it.
Michael, what is your timeline from Neanderthals, Cro-Magnons, and modern humans? What is your timeline?
Well, the way I look at it is these creatures have always coexisted with each other. It's not that one comes from the other. And, that's becoming apparent. There have been some recent studies of human genomes that contain a lot of the Neanderthal genome. And our picture of Neanderthals is gradually changing. They used to be depicted as very stoop-shouldered, beetle-browed, low forehead, no real culture. But in recent years, scientists have been discovering they may have been responsible for some of the art in the caves, the very wonderful paintings of animals and other things like that. There's been a recent study come out of the Iberian Peninsula, Spain and Portugal, about showing that Neanderthals coexisted with humans like us and interbred with us and had a similar level of culture in terms of the kinds of tools and weapons they used, the behaviors they engaged in. They engaged in ritual behavior. They appear to have had some concept of an afterlife. It's really pretty amazing. And I'm kind of inclined to expand our definition of Homo sapiens to include these Neanderthals.
Interesting take. We're going to take a short break and come back with more with Michael Cremo. We'll open up the phone lines next hour and give you an opportunity to talk to the forbidden archaeologist. Michael Cremo, our special guest, and we'll take calls with him next hour as we talk with the forbidden archaeologist. Wow, he's got some great, exciting information. Well, next week, my friends, it's Halloween. Here we go into the season, and we're looking for your story, Tom.
We sure are. We're going to have some fun Halloween night, Ghost to Ghost. Send us your best ghost story, along with your name and phone number to HalloweenStory@coasttocoastam.com. We're going to sift through them. We'll find some ones. We'll call you back, and you just might be able to read it on the air.
And if you don't get called, don't worry, because we've got the open lines going on, too. So just call like you normally would to get on the show. But Tommy wants to solicit some real stories and get you on. So write Halloween story at coasttocoastam.com. But we've got open lines during that portion of the Halloween night show. So make sure you're part of the show. And welcome back to Coast to Coast. George Norrie with Michael Cremo. We'll take calls with Michael next hour. Michael, what was it that you saw back in 1993 when you wrote Forbidden Archaeology that got you to jump onto this topic?
Well, that has to do with my studies in the ancient Sanskrit writings of India. I noticed that they spoke of a very ancient human presence on this planet going back millions of years, many millions of years, all the way back to the very beginning of the history of Earth. So I thought, along with my co-author, Richard Thompson, that is that just some mythological statement, or is there perhaps some physical evidence to back it up? So that's when I started looking into the history of archaeology, because you're not going to find any evidence for humans existing millions of years ago in the current textbooks of archaeology. But I thought, let me just have a look. Maybe I'll find a couple things. I'll write a little article about it and then go on to something else. But when I did start looking into the history of archaeology at the original scientific reports, I began to find dozens of them showing that archaeologists, geologists, paleontologists, other scientists have discovered human bones, human artifacts, human footprints going back many, many millions of years, and one just led to another. So I was planning on maybe doing 8 days research, but it turned into 8 weeks, 8 months, 8 years, because one case just led to another. And that's what we collected, all of those reports, and put them out in Forbidden Archaeology. Call it forbidden because you don't find these things in the textbooks. You got to dig beyond them.
Did you come across anything that dealt with the ancient flying machines of the Vimanas?
Yeah, actually I did. That's a whole other topic it's really fascinating, that these ancient Sanskrit writings, which go back thousands and thousands of years, speak about things that we're seeing today, that people are observing right now. UFOs, Vimanas they were called. And some of them had very unusual capabilities. They could fly in such a way that they appeared in several places at once to confuse maybe some people who were trying to shoot them down. And, they had abilities to project holographic images of people that were fully convincing, kind of like some of the modern techniques that are coming into use now. So it's pretty amazing that, even if you want to say it's just imagination on the part of whoever was writing these books, it's pretty amazing that what they were imagining thousands of years ago is exactly what we're seeing today.
That is truly remarkable. And were these objects that they saw then, like you said, the UFOs of today, or did we have them and we had that kind of technology?
People on Earth had that kind of technology as well. it's like any technology, it can be used for good or evil. A lot of the countries in the world or the forces that are engaged in fighting in different places, they have the same kinds of weapons, but they use them in different ways for different purposes. So it's the same with Vimanas. You could always say there have been forces of light and forces of darkness operating in the world, and not even just in the world, but on an interplanetary level. We have, of course, the whole Star Wars franchise, which is based on accounts from ancient wisdom traditions. That's where it originally came from, these battles between the forces of darkness and forces of light in the universe. And they make use of different technologies. So one of them was these Vimanas. Another was Brahmastras, which are weapons resembling modern nuclear weapons. So maybe that's why Robert Oppenheimer, the physicist in charge of the building the bomb for America during World War II, when he was asked, what is it like to be involved in making the first atomic bomb? He said the first in modern times.
Exactly.
Because he was aware of these accounts of these things existing in ancient times.
Do you think the Bible is something that is constructed dealing with real events that have occurred from either extraterrestrials or ancient mankind with superior technology, and they made it sound like it's angelic and heavenly and things like that?
Well, the way I look at it is that two things aren't necessarily exclusive. It could be both things. They perceive the technology and they put a little bit of their own spin on it. That happens all the time. If people are looking at a mountain from different directions, from the north, the south, the east, the west, the description they give of it and the emotional feeling they attach to it are going to be slightly different depending upon which angle they're looking at it from. But it's also going to be obvious they're seeing something real. If you put the descriptions together, you get a whole picture that they're looking at the same thing, but just from their own direction. So there can be different kinds of extraterrestrials, I believe. There can be flesh and blood extraterrestrials living on Earth-like planets, circling stars and other parts of our galaxy. And they may have developed technologies similar to ours, and they use them. And there may also be higher dimensional beings that people might put a label on, angels or jinn or gods or goddesses, but they really are on a higher level of energy or awareness than we are on this level. And there may be other types of beings who are not friendly, who are interested in conquering and dominating and controlling everything, including people on other planets or even other galaxies. Things could be a little more complicated than people think. People tend to want a simple explanation, a simple God created everything explanation, a simple everything just evolved explanation, a simple extraterrestrial explanation. But the real story may be more complicated. It may involve weaving a lot of those things together in a very complex tapestry where, there is some guiding cosmic intelligence. There is a kind of evolution that goes on, but more an evolution of consciousness rather than the kind that Darwin talked about. And yeah, there is an extraterrestrial element to it.
Exciting.
And there are intelligent living beings with advanced technologies existing in this cosmos.
Michael, do you think the biblical account of Sodom and Gomorrah, claiming that God destroyed the city, might have been an atomic explosion from somewhere?
Well, it could, as I said, it could involve some higher intelligent being doing something. It could involve other kinds of extraterrestrial beings with technologies like that. I think if we look at all of the wisdom traditions, if we look at the Bible, the Old Testament, the New Testament, the Vedas, the writings of different cultures down through time, the Greeks, the Romans, the ancient Chinese, the Incas, the Aztecs, Pacific Islanders, Native American Indians, Aboriginal tribal people in Australia, they all involve something that would be very consistent with the information that we get in the Bible. So, yeah, I think the Bible and many other texts are genuine sources of knowledge reflecting realities that these people experience. And there is kind of a cultural aspect to it where the language they use and the imagery that they use may be particular to their time and place and circumstance. But I think they're also touching on realities that transcend their time, their place, and their circumstance, because you find these commonalities. You were mentioning a flood earlier. Practically every culture in the world has a flood account.
Yeah.
Practically every culture in the world has beings coming from different levels of reality. They have some concept of the survival of the self after the death of the body. They have some concept that there's some cosmic system of justice. There's so many commonalities in the worldviews that come from these different places. And I think that's because they're all approaching the same cosmic realities from their particular time, place, and circumstance.
Michael, you were in Europe recently. What were you doing there, and what was the subject at hand?
Well, I was invited to Zurich, Switzerland, to be the keynote speaker at a conference on science, spirituality, and world peace. And I think, events are just showing how much of an urgent need there is for that kind of thing. There's an organization that puts out the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists. It's an organization that was formed by Albert Einstein and Robert Oppenheimer and other atomic scientists after World War II. They were disappointed in how their research was used, and the weapon that they had produced was actually employed. They didn't anticipate that it was going to be used on cities to
destroy people.
So they formed this organization. They came up with something they call the Doomsday Clock, midnight being atomic catastrophe. And they set the clock in 1947 to 20 minutes to midnight. They set it every year. This organization of nuclear scientists sets the clock every year. And this year they set it to 90 seconds before midnight.
Way too close for me, Michael.
Yeah, it is. They say this is the closest we have ever come to nuclear war between the major powers that have these nuclear weapons. And I've lived through a lot of things. I lived through the Berlin Wall crisis.
The Cuban Missile Crisis I was through. I was 12 when that happened.
Through so many crises, but this is worse than that. The current world situation is worse than that. So I think there has to be some change.
Dramatic but were they receptive to you?
Yes, they were. And then after that, I went to Budapest, Hungary, to speak about the Vedic cosmology at a conference there. And that the cosmology that's in the Vedic culture, I think, is very conducive to world peace because it recognizes that everyone is a conscious, individual, personal being, not just people, but animals, plants. They all have souls, and we're all related to each other. There's no need to be dividing ourselves up into competing groups based on superficial differences and fighting and competing with each other. It's, I think a lot of the problems in the world would be solved if we just had a different sense of our identity, a different sense of what this cosmos is and what it's for. So it was kind of a fantastic couple of weeks that I spent in Europe, getting to talk about these things, because I think it's something that's very much needed in the world today.
Were you out there before the Hamas invasion of Gaza?
Yes, I was.
Oh, that's safe for you, at least. Good. And you're going to be at the Stairway to the Stars conference in Vegas next month,
that's
right?
Right. I'm really looking forward to that because I call it a really stellar event. Yeah, Stairway to the Stars.
Literally.
It's because they're trying to put out a vibe there, you could say, that where we're going to examine all the different speakers, myself and others, are going to be examining different questions related to the origin of civilization and humanity and all of these things.
Hold on for a second, Michael. We're at the top of the hour already. We'll be back. We'll chat more, but we'll also open up the phone lines. They're open right now. Questions for Michael Cremo.